I can get it from you or get the file from you.
That sounds good.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Mary.
Yep, I'm going to go back. Let's see if this pulls right back up again. All right, can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Yay, okay. Good. I'm going to do one other thing on here. That's great. Okay, so good afternoon for everybody who's online. My name is Mary Anderson. I'm the Director of Career Services here on campus in Duluth, and excited to be connecting with you. I think most of you we've connected at least once before, so it's nice to connect a second time with you. Katie invited me to Zoom in and share information with you today, primarily on interviewing, but we're going to touch a little bit on social media. And with that, I'm also going to share just a little bit about a new site we have for posting jobs and internships that come in to us. So I want you to be aware of that. We won't be communicating via our microphones. We're going to use the chat function. I think it's a little bit easier for this particular presentation. So I'll be giving you lots of information, asking you some questions along the way to have you give your opinions and share with me. And then, of course, if you have questions at any time, you need a clarification, if you have a contribution, because I know many of you have done interviewing in the past as a candidate, but you've been on the other side of the table, and love to hear your perspective as we go through. If at any time you're having trouble seeing me or I've done something to change my display, just let me know and we'll work through that together. All right. So I'm always curious when I start the Zoom presentations of where you all are coming from. So where's home? Where are you sitting right now? What city? What state? So if you just chat that in, I'd be curious to see the range for all of you. Yeah, okay. So yes, several of you I remember from emails back and forth and resumes and different things. So that the word around our office right now is that we could have a huge snowstorm coming in on Sunday, so people are already thinking we're going to have Monday off. But I imagine there's a chance it could just blow south. So I'm trying not to get any hopes up about that, right? But it's been an interesting winter, I think, for those of us in the Midwest. Good. Okay, well, let's get started. And as Katie said, it's being recorded, and I will be sharing the PowerPoint, which will be posted on your class. So do feel free to take notes as you go through, but also know all the materials available for you later. I also want to let you know if you take all this in and it's a year from now that you need to go back to it because you have an interview, you can always reach back out to us. Sometimes the questions come up when the interview is actually taking place, and that might not be right away for you. So don't hesitate to reach back out to our office in the future if you have questions. Okay. I lost my mouse control, so let's see if I can get this to. There we go. Okay, so when we talk about the application process, and again, some of this will sound familiar to you, we talk about all the steps along the way is your chance to articulate your story, your experiences, your education. So we start, talking about resumes and cover letters, your written documents to do that. Today we're going to talk about the other two pieces, which is your verbal communication through an interview and your online social media presence and how that has become part of the job search process. So we'll talk about both of those things. So the first question I have for you, and you can again chat in your answers, when there was a research study that was done, fascinating, where they asked folks who do lots and lots of interviews, the human resource folks, the recruiters, what they're actually looking for through the interview process. And I'm wondering what you think their response might have been. So if they had to boil it down to just a few things, what do you think they're really looking for during the interview process? So share your ideas. If a recruiter was asked, what are you really looking for? What might they answer that they're looking for during an interview? Okay, yep, communication skills. Communication, and you might remember this even from the transferable skills on writing resumes. For sure, it's always one of the top skills that employers are looking for. And so it starts with that written communication, of course. In the interview, it's the verbal communication. How to present yourself, your confidence, are you skilled? Yep, those are all great. Sometimes it seems obvious, you're all of those things, being able to work with others. When they did the survey, they boiled down the answers to 3 buckets. And the first was they want to confirm and make sure your education, your training, those qualifications match the job. They know that's true at a minimum level, or they wouldn't even bring you in for the interview. You have to be basically qualified, but they're digging into that a little bit different. Do you really have the right training qualifications? The second thing they all talked about is we want to hear more about their experiences and how those experiences translate or relate to this particular position. Makes sense. The third thing that was my favorite, the third thing they say is, and if we hire you through the interview process, we want to make sure that you won't annoy us, which I think is just classic, right? So they want to have people who are team players, who work independently, strong communication, not complainers, and you've all worked with those people, so you know what that can look like. So if you think of those 3 concepts, as you're preparing for interviews, it guides what you think you need to prepare for. You need to be able to talk about education, training, qualifications, your experiences and how they relate to the position that you're applying for. And then in general, you're showing some of your personality and talking that often in terms of your transferable skills of being a team player, taking initiative, working hard, et cetera, et cetera. So I love that. Those are the 3 basic things. With that in mind, the interview really is your chance to have a conversation. For many people, interviewing brings on a lot of anxiety. It's stressful. It may always be stressful for you, but if you can change your mindset to be thinking about, this is a conversation about me, and who knows you best? You do. You know your successes. You know the times you've learned and grown from an experience. You know your goals and what you're looking for. So if you can switch the idea that instead of an interview, like an intense interview, it's a conversation about you. It's your chance to share your background and your future plans. The point of preparation and the tips I'm going to give you is to make sure your nerves don't take over during the interview process. It's not to prepare to make you someone you're not. I still want to make sure that in the end, when you arrive the day of the interview, you're authentic, you're genuine. And positive and enthusiastic seems obvious. What often happens to folks during interviews is it makes you super serious, which it should. You're taking it seriously. But the recruiters will say to us, make sure they show their enthusiasm for the position, their excitement, that they smile, that they use humor, at least appropriate, and some laughter. That's when they start to see your personality. Giving concrete examples is probably the biggest takeaway. If you only remember one thing, is that you need to come up with concrete, specific examples. So avoiding vague answers. Yeah, I have no problem working in teams and other people. I've always done that. Too general. You might start with a statement like that, but then you go in and say, for example, and you can give a specific. And always, the employers don't expect that you're going to know everything about the job. So they would expect that you are still learning, and you being honest about that is great. Here's the things I know. Here's the things that I'm excited to learn in the future. So don't feel like you have to know everything, but that you have that excitement and dedication to learning in the future. Hmm. Okay, lots of resources out there for you. I would say take advantage of these. I'd also say don't go overboard and be trying to prepare for every question you could ever get, because that's overwhelming. So use it to guide you, and at some point you have to put away all the tips, all the resources, and just focus on what you want to share and what your stories are. We do have lots of resources on our website. You can purchase books. You can Google typical interview questions. So there's lots of ways for you to get that information. Okay, when we talk with employers, and even through the mock interviews we do in our office, I want to just get right into some of the specific feedback that we receive. One of the biggest things employers will say is, if we ask the question, why do you want to work for us? We want to make sure you have a concrete example or reason, rationale behind that. For you, that means doing a little bit of research on the organization ahead of time. So you want to know their mission and their values, their history, how they're funded, who are they affiliated with, have they been in the news recently, do they have specialty areas, what's their reputation? So definitely take some time, and you can do lots of your research right on their website. That's great. But no, they're only going to put all the great things on their website. So then do a deeper search than that. Talk to people, if you can, who work there. See when they've been in the news recently. Find out if other people in your class, the faculty members, does anybody have contact connections with that place? Again, this is very common. Why do you want to work for us? Why are you interested in this position? This one seems basic and sort of silly, but for many of you, you might have written your resume months before you actually have your interview. And so taking that back out again and making sure for every bulleted description you have a story to supplement it, to describe it. Remembering the dates, remembering what you listed, remembering the experiences, because again, it's not uncommon for them to say, I noticed here that you stated, and then they show you something on your resume, and then they might say, can you tell me more about that? Can you give me an example? Was it successful? So whatever you have on your resume, be ready to flush that out in an interview. Okay, lots of different ways you can practice. Katie, I forgot to ask you, are you having them do an assignment using InterviewStream again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I'll be required to do that.
Okay, so InterviewStream, okay, lots of ways to practice. One of the things I want you to think about is sometimes the answer sounds great in our head, and then when we try to say it out loud, it's like, boy, it doesn't sound as great as it did when I was just thinking about it. So moving from thinking about responses to actually saying them out loud. You can do that by yourself when you're driving in the car. People think you're singing along, right? But you're actually answering interview questions. You can have a friend, a roommate, a family member ask you questions and just practice what it sounds like to talk about yourself and your successes. Another way you can do it, and it will be one of your assignments, is to use a technology that we have on our website called InterviewStream. As long as you have a computer with a webcam or can borrow that from someone, you will go on and select a bank of questions. You will respond. It will all be recorded, just you and the computer. But it's great because you can start to recognize patterns. Boy, I didn't know I played with my hair all the time through. I didn't know that anytime I talk, I'm fidgeting with my pen or pencil. I didn't realize that I start every single response with the word So it's a great way to not only say it out loud, but then be able to critique that. So to get to this, on our website, and Katie may be giving you the direct link too, but it's under css.edu/career. You will see on the right-hand side, not very far down, there's a button and it says InterviewStream. So you would select that. Unfortunately, it's one more place you have to create another username or another password. So apologies for that, but you have to be a CSS student to get in. So one more password for you to remember. You create that. There's two different ways you can do interviews on this site. You say conduct an interview, and then you either will choose created for me or custom interview. In your case, you'll be using the created for me, and you'll get to the next screen that looks like this, and you'll find one that says HIM on there. You can, though, you might do that for the class and feel like, oh, this is great, I want to practice more. They have a bank of thousands of questions that you can select from. So what would happen is you'd go in either the created interview or you choose your own questions, and then a face shows up on your screen and says, whatever question. Describe a clinical situation that taught you a memorable nursing lesson. That would be for a nursing student. And then you respond. And then you can re-record it if you're like, boy, I goofed that up, I want to try it again. Or you say, great, I'm going to move on to the next question. One thing that we have found, it seems like about once a year, we have a student who has some problems with the particular website, and there's two strategies we found. One is change your browser. If it seems like it's taking a while to load, try a different browser and see if you have better luck. The second is occasionally if people don't have great internet connection at their house, it's been an issue. So try those first, change browser, see if you can get to a place that has a stronger internet connection. If it just isn't still working and you can't access that, then we could do a mock interview with you via Skype or Google Hangout. I think I would say 90%, 95% of the students it works for, but occasionally it has been a challenge. So don't hesitate to reach out if that comes up. Okay, so let's say you go on to this system, or you're practicing on your own, or you have a family member who's giving you some questions and you're giving your response. If you would chat in your thoughts on this, how long do you think is typical or desired for your response time? They ask you the question, you're answering, about how much time should your answers take? That's good. So generally, response time 1 to 2 minutes. And so it's really nice for you to actually time it so you know what it feels like to talk for 1 to 2 minutes. If you time it and it's 20 to 30 seconds, you're probably not giving enough depth. If you time it and you're talking 3 to 4 minutes, you're going on too long. And it sounds like a short period of time, but attention span beyond about 2 minutes, they stop listening. So even when you do interview stream, if you start talking more than 2 minutes, it cuts you off, which seems a little brutal, but it's helpful for you to see what it looks like and feels like to talk for about 1 to 2 minutes. Um, and then, oh, I think your question, what you're responding to is how long can you have silence before? Maybe that's what you're responding. Yeah, you can pause to think about your answers for sure. If it's going to be longer than a little bit of time, I usually would say, I need just a minute to think of a good example for that question. And then that gives you permission to have more silence, or it feels more comfortable to have more silence. So definitely, you don't have to jump in immediately if you don't have a good example. Give a little bit of silence or pause and then come back with that example. Again, if you think it's going to be longer than just 5-10 seconds, then I would say, I need a little bit of time to think about this one. Good. Okay. So the next piece I want to talk about is a handshake. Many of you have been out working in the world of work for a long time, so this is not unknown to you. I would say most interviews include a handshake. Not all. It is cultural, it is regional, but most places still are using a greeting with a handshake. So just remember, if you have to do that to feel comfortable and confident in the process, the main thing I see with people is you want to be trying basically to hit here and here, right? So if you don't, you end up with these weird handshakes like this that become awkward. So if you can attempt to meet right there, firm, not bone crushing, and you don't need to go on and on and on. Usually it's sort of 1, 2, and then you drop your hand. You can follow the lead of the person hosting the interview, and so again, awareness of setting and culture, but generally you would greet with a handshake, some introductions, and at the very end you might do the same. You might just shake hands again, thanks for your time, I enjoyed being here for the interview. So be aware of that. Okay, types of questions to expect. So let's jump into these. I find they fall in generally 4 buckets. Sort of general typical interview questions, behavioral based, major specific, and oddball is my best description for the last category. General interview questions are the ones that you could receive sort of anywhere, anytime, regardless of industry. These are so common, it is worth it for you to think about, not in a memorized way, but what are the main 2 or 3 points that you're going to share? So questions like, tell me about yourself. What are your strengths? What are areas that you're working on? Why should we hire you? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? So bank of questions like that. The second type you will find are becoming more and more popular are behavioral based. These would be questions like, give me an example of a time when you were part of a team on a project. What role did you take? Give me an example when you had to work with a really difficult coworker or supervisor. How did you manage that situation? So we're going to come back to these because I'm going to give you some strategy of how to prepare and how to answer those. Third type, major specific or field specific. I actually find those are the easiest for people. It moves the conversation away from you, and it's more about your knowledge, your experiences, what systems, what programming, what roles have you had within an organization. So not that they're not important, but they tend to come easier for people. And then the last grouping would be these oddball questions. So I'm going to talk about it a little bit, but if you've had an oddball question, will you chat it in? Because I think it's interesting to hear the range of questions people have had in this area. So oddball will be things like, if you were a type of breakfast cereal, what type of cereal would you be and why? Or what's your favorite color? Or what's the last movie you saw? Are you reading any good books right now? So if any of you have had a question like that, share those because I always find they're entertaining and interesting. What I want you to know about them, there's no right or wrong answer to those questions. They're generally looking for your ability to think on your feet, to show some humor, and to see a little bit of your personality. Um, okay, what type of dog, what kind of dog would you be and why? How do you drink your coffee? I have never heard that one. Um, Leah and Lindsay, do you have any suggestions on how to answer those based on your experiences or what you said? I think dog is like many of them. It doesn't really matter as long as it connects in some way to who you are, but I'm curious to see what you answered for that. How do you drink your coffee? Again, probably your ability to think on your feet, not get caught off guard, not be maybe too adamant one way or the other. I'm not sure. Let's see, trying to think what kind of dog I would be. Golden Retriever, loyal, smart, play well with others, perfect. I mean, that's exactly the kind of thing they're looking for. So does it matter which type of dog? Probably not, but as long as you can make the connection to some of your personality traits and skills, that's perfect. Good, okay. The only thing I've heard from people that they sometimes look for is if that you're well-rounded sometimes is what comes out. So if it's have you seen a movie or if you have you read a book? So I had one student who had the have you read a book recently? Well, as a student, you often don't have time to do much pleasure reading, I would say. Some people do, but the person said, well, I just said I don't read because everything I'm doing is for class. And I said, that's fine. You could say that, but you could also say, when I do have free time, I'm someone who really likes mysteries. It's escape, and that's I have time when I'm reading difficult information for class, and then when I don't, I love to escape with them. So whatever it is, but to show that well-roundedness. Yeah, that's great. I love it. So the coffee, strong because it's the type of person I believe I am, little sugar because I can be very caring and sweet. Exactly. By doing that, also I get to know you just a little bit better through a very interesting question. So don't get thrown off by these. Try to use some humor, show a little bit of your personality. When you answer the questions, again, we talked before, specific, concrete. Don't be afraid to brag, to share your skills. That is the point of the interview. Our culture in general, we tend to be humble. We're not real comfortable talking about our successes and our strengths. So that's why it's good to practice talking about that out loud and gaining more comfort in doing that. You definitely can use experiences from a wide range. It doesn't have to just be from your job. It can be from academics. It can be from community involvement, other leadership roles. All of those show who you are. So feel free to draw from lots of different settings in your life. Some other quick tips that I hear. So avoid negative talk. So back to that theme of if we hire you, we want to make sure you're someone who won't annoy us. That's where this comes in. Now, sometimes they ask for negative information, but it's how you frame it or how you respond. So if the question was, in your most recent academics, tell me about the class you liked least and why. Well, they're asking you for that. And what you want to avoid is getting into sort of that pitfall or that rabbit hole of, and it was the professor's fault. It was a terrible class. I don't know why they had us take this subject, etc., where you're blaming other people. So instead, if you can still admit this class was difficult for me, the teaching style was different than how I learn. What I ended up doing to make it successful was, and you fill in the blank. I did more learning on my own. I created a study group. I did some outside reading, whatever it is where you show that you can take control and resolve those. We already talked about the pausing. Staying active. So sometimes, again, people get serious and they think in an interview you shouldn't be using your hands at all. If you're someone who talks with your hands, it's okay to do that. If not, you end up looking sort of like a deer in the headlights. So good eye contact, sitting up straight, using some of your natural hand gestures, all the things you're probably comfortable in doing your day-to-day. One of the hardest questions for people is, tell me about yourself. And I think this is interesting. It seems like it should be easy, but the challenge is, where do you start? Where do you end? In general, for this question, It's professional. You don't have to give a lot of personal background. If you think about describing who you are today, a little bit of background of how you got here, and then where you're going in the future. So you might talk about being in this program, how far along you are, why you chose to enroll, a little bit about your current position if you're currently working, and then maybe a little bit how you got interested. How did this all begin? And then I'm looking forward to the next step because. So maybe it's a promotion, maybe it's a job change, whatever that next step is. So who are you right now? A little bit about work, a little bit about your experience, your education. How did you get to this point, and where are you going in the future? Um, This question from Emily, this is great. I have you are an HIM manager, so when have you worked with a team member not pulling his or own weight? Yeah, it says a lot about people. Target comes on campus and interviews for store managers, and they ask a very similar question to that too, for the same reason. I think it gives you a lot of insight. Interesting, right? And maybe, Emily, if you're willing to share, if you had tips on the most successful answers to that. It seems to me it's acknowledging it, so not just ignoring it, how you can be direct but supportive to ask why aren't they pulling their own weight? Do they not have the resources? Do they not have the support? And if you've done something enough and you aren't moving forward, when do you choose to bring in a supervisor? So it seems like those are the kind of things they're probably looking for versus going right to a supervisor, ignoring, waiting too long to address it. Seems like that can be a challenge. You don't want to wait too long. So Emily, if you have any, I'll check in a second to see if you've typed anything in, but that's a great question. When I think about this, tell me a little bit about yourself question. If you think about lawyers, like courtroom lawyers, they generally have a really strong opening statement, a really strong closing statement, and along the way, a whole bunch of facts to support whatever the argument is. It's sort of what you're doing in an interview, and you want to feel real comfortable with your opening and closing, and then you're going to have all these stories along the way. So the opening often is, tell me about yourself, or tell me why you're interested in this position, or why are you interested in us, those types of questions. So make sure you're feeling solid. The end supporting or last question would be, anything else you want us to know about you? Summarize again why we should hire you. And even if you feel like you've said most of that, you restate it. Well, I want to state once again X, Y, Z. Maybe 3 different points you really want to focus on. Yeah, complaining about others. Yeah, I know. As soon as someone starts complaining, especially in an interview, it's like a red flag for people. And again, not that they might not be justified, they might have had a very difficult person they work with, but if there's too much energy put on others and the fault of the other, you're concerned. Is this someone that's going to be a pattern for? Yeah, yeah. Difficult situation with a coworker. I think just difficult people in general. I'm going to see. Yeah. All of those, exactly. Thank you for all of those. Those are great. I think everyone's right on track. It's how you resolve it, how you problem solve, those critical thinking skills, open communication, transparency, and all of those come across in the way you might answer that question. Okay. Sorry. For some reason, occasionally I can't forward on my screen. There, okay. So here's the next piece I want to talk with you, which I think is really interesting. So as these behavioral-based questions are becoming more and more common, we realize that there's an art to answering them. And I don't think this will be new to you. You've probably heard it referred to as the STAR response: situation, task, results, ST. action results. I pare it down to 3. I think it's easier for people to handle the idea of 3 steps in response. So it's really the setup, the action, and the results. In good storytelling, you go through each one of those. For many of us, when we're answering interview questions, our initial reaction is to stay stuck in the middle. We just jump in. What was the action? Good storytelling, you start with the setup because it gives folks the context where you're coming from. So the question maybe is a time when you've had a difficult coworker. So you might say, well, in my former position, I worked with a team of 10 people, a little bit of the scope of your work. Maybe you had supervision, maybe you didn't, so you describe that a little bit, and what the challenge was with the person. All of a sudden, I understand where you're coming from. Then you go into, so this was a really challenging situation because you describe it, what action you took. And then again, the key to good storytelling is having the last part, the results, the action, what you learned from it. And there'll be times where you say, I wouldn't do it the same way. I learned, I waited too long. I really need to make those conversations and adjustments earlier in the process. That's great. You can talk about what you learned. Or it might be simply restating the question. So I think that's a great example of a time where I had to navigate a really difficult coworker. Boom, you've restated the question. I know you're done. We go on to the next question. So with this, one of the ways to best prepare for interviews is to come up with about, I would say, 10, 15 really good stories about yourself related to the kind of behavioral-based questions we think they're going to answer. So remember at the beginning when I was asking you what you think the employers are looking for, and you said some of the things you had were communication skills, independence, positivity, confidence. Are there other transferable skills like that that you think would be particularly relevant for your field? And if so, if you would just chat those in. So we already talked about communication, positive, some confidence. Yeah, problem solving, critical thinking, both of those for sure. What else in your field? Yeah, customer service. Yeah, I think customer service is interesting. We get asked about customer service at the college, and I see my customers as faculty and other staff and students, like in a broad sense. What does that mean? Your coworkers, independence, time management, multitasking, organization, team player, attention to detail. Yeah, problem solver, right? You come up with ideas. That's exactly right. So if you think of all those, and you might have others in mind too that you would also say would be true, um, for each one of those, I'd want you to think of an example that shows that you have those skills. So that if I said, give me an example of a time where you had to use your skill and flexibility, what did that look like? That you would have an answer to that. So yeah, again, 10 to 15, critical thinking, working with diverse populations, setting, achieving goals, difficult people, cultural competence, initiative, et cetera, et cetera. I think you can come up with those on your own. I think that the key is for these, again, concrete, and you can work through the story. Here's the situation. Here's what I did. Here's what I'm proud of. Here's what I learned from the situation. Here's how it would translate to a position in the future. Okay. Does anybody feel brave to put their mic on and we practice a question to see what that would look like? Everybody's like, nope. It's okay if you don't. But if someone's willing, can jump in. Okay. Good excuse, right? There's way too much going on. That's okay. Oh, you will? Emily will. Great. Okay. Emily, do you have your mic on already, or can you?
I think it's on.
Yep, I can hear you. So
Okay.
this will be working, so don't feel like this is going to have to be perfect, but I want to walk through with someone in real life what this would look like. So let's say the question was, tell me about a time you had to teach someone something. What strategies did you use? Was it effective? So I'll give you a second to think about your answer. And as she's thinking about it, all of you can think how you would answer this. And sometimes it's like, wow, this is interesting. I'm not applying to be a teacher, but I bet in lots of your roles, you're training other people, you're training coworkers, you're training other people in the medical profession, you're training customers on how to do something. So there might be that question of how do you teach others to do it? So Emily, if you're asked that question again, we're not going to expect you to be perfect, but give a shot of how you might respond to that.
Sure. I'll probably respond with experiences that I've had with training other staff. There's sometimes with new employees and things that I would be the one that would help them be training on a new task and things like that. And the way I go about it and kind of strategies I'd use is to first kind of talk to them and get to know them and what type of learner they are, because I know for myself, I'm a visual learner. So if you have a tip sheet or a graph or something that I can look at, it helps me learn things much better, along with physically writing out notes versus typing notes. I tend to learn it better. So I kind of customize it to each person. So if they're a visual learner, I'll kind of use some of the things that might work well for me. If they are more of an audio learner or whatever it might be, trying to kind of tailor my teaching and training to them to whatever their strengths are, and kind of customize it, and then also breaking it down. So if I have to train them on 5 different areas, start with the beginning of it, but kind of break it down into sections if it's possible, kind of depending on what the case is and what I'm training on. But if I can break it down into smaller sections and review it, and then I also, I might be going over my time limit for the 1 minute, but I also try to do the training of, I do it first and they watch me, and they can kind of see it, and then the next time they do it and I watch them, so they can actually do hands-on and get an experience with that.
That's perfect. Thank you for being brave to be the volunteer. So you can see how sometimes, you know, in your head you do this all the time, and then you're, well, how am I going to say this and how I'm going to say it succinctly. Your timing was actually probably about right. I didn't time you, but I think you're pretty close. So I think everything you said was great. I think if you add more about the context at the beginning, so I would be just a little more concrete at the beginning with something like, I've been someone who does training in my last 3 jobs, formally in one, more informally in the other 2, mostly with new staff or whatever it is. So just a little bit more concrete there. Then your examples are great. I do it by knowing their learning style. You give some examples. I show, then have them watch, then we ask questions. And then at the end, you could, maybe you did, I can't remember, but you could have a summary statement. So generally, that's how I would approach teaching. Now, if you also knew this was a big component of the job, I think you could add in, and we don't have that, I wouldn't have expected you to do that, but you could add in, and I really enjoy being in that role. I found that I'm a strong teacher, and I find I gain energy when I'm teaching other people, if it's part of your job, because then you start to show enthusiasm for one of the tasks for the job. Your pacing is about right. So the other things I would have everybody look or practice, how fast you talk, how slow, and are you someone who, when you get anxious, you're going to talk faster? Your pacing was great. Volume was about right. So it's hard to tell via technology, but you don't want to be way too loud or way too soft to seem like you're about right there. And then, of course, again, not with this technology, but we'd be looking for eye contact and that you're not fidgeting. It looked like you did all of that great. Let's see, the only other thing I was thinking that I noticed that something you did that I hear all the time. Oh, I just had a student in that did a mock interview, and they had the exact same thing that you did. They used kind of real frequently in their responses. And I think it's filler language, and we all have different things that we use as filler language. For some of us, it's kind of. Some of us, it's like, those types of words. You're not going to eliminate it altogether, so don't freak out if you hear yourself saying those once in a while, but the goal is to limit and do it less. I think with phrases like kind of, and there's another phrase like that I hear students use fairly frequently, if you cut it back, then it doesn't, if you use it too much, it makes you sound less confident. If you can cut it back, you sound more confident. So practice those for everybody. What is the filler language? What's your go-to filler? And can you cut back the number of times you use it? You know, I do it obviously too. The other one I hear that's become common the last few years is right. So I might say, so if you did that, it doesn't sound professional, right? So ending with that phrase, and it's become more common recently. Yeah. So Minnesotan, we also tend to end things as a question, even when we're making a statement. So trying to have less of the question and more of a statement, which is a confidence. That's great. Thank you, Emily. That was great. And I think the more you practice, again, people may not love interviewing, but you're like, oh, I can do this. And you thought right on your feet and came up with that answer. That's good. Okay, so practicing, practice, practice. There are times when you might get illegal questions. So there are legal things to ask in illegal. Generally, illegal are things like race, gender, ethnicity, religious preference, family. If someone asks this, you have like 3 choices of how to address it. You can just answer the question thinking it was asked sort of out of ignorance about what's legal and what's illegal. You can refuse to answer it, and you could say, that's an illegal question to ask as part of an interview. I'm going to choose not to answer that. Sometimes that can come across harsh, especially if it was just a naive, they didn't know it was illegal. Many people will do something in between. They'll answer it in more of a vague way, or they will redirect the question. So if they say, so if you're hired, you'll be relocating. Will you be bringing family with you? It's probably conversational, but they actually can't ask you that. So you could say, yes, I do have family. We're already looking at plans and looking at the school district. We're excited about the opportunity. And you're just sort of brief with it. It could be, so I see that you completed your education at the College of St. Scholastica. Does that mean you're Catholic? Is everybody there Catholic? And you could answer generally again, like, I did choose it because of the values. Will it make a difference for this particular job, my religious preference? So you kind of push it back on them. So just be aware that you have some choices on answering or not answering those. Most employers would like you to come with questions for them as well. So it's not just them interviewing you, you're checking them out. Do you want to work there? Generally, at this point, you wouldn't be asking about salary or benefits, vacation days. That would come later in the process. It's more questions to help you to decide if it's an environment or a job that you would be interested in. So questions like, what are the training opportunities? Who would my direct supervisor? What's a typical day like? What is generally the challenge for people in this position? What's your time frame? What are the next steps? I usually encourage people to write these or type these and bring them with, so you're not trying to remember them. So they get to a point, they say, do you have any questions from us? You say, yes, I prepared a couple. I would bring in 8 to 10, but you're only going to ask 2 to 3. And the reason I'm having you over-prepare is often along the way they've addressed a lot of those questions. So you're like, oh, they already answered all of these. So you want to make sure you have at least a couple left that you can ask from your list. Okay. Appearance, what to wear or maybe what not to wear is the question. When we ask employers, they really say it's all about not being distracting, that there is not just one way to wear your hair or one clothing style, but that no matter what that looks like for you, that they're focused on you and your story, not what you're wearing. So generally a bit more conservative, pretty simple, professional, nothing distracting. If you're someone who wears earrings, do minimal for that day. Avoid perfume and cologne, and in many medical settings that would be a requirement. Being thoughtful not to have a bunch of garlic right before you go in. Comfortable shoes. Often you're walking a bit. They might give you a tour. Make sure you're comfortable. If you're not used to wearing a suit jacket and you are, when you sit down, is it buttoned? Is it unbuttoned? Make sure you're comfortable. Generally in your field, when you're going in for interviews, it is fairly formal, even though day to day you're not dressing up in a suit and tie kind of environment. But the interview would be expecting that for a lot of the professional positions that you're applying for. Okay. Day before, the goal is to not look like the person in this image. We don't want you to feel frantic because you're running late, you weren't prepared. You want everything to just be prepared ahead of time so that you can calmly get to the interview. So all those things you can think of ahead of time. So I chose this little picture, but there is studies about doing a little power pose right before you get to an interview. And if you go on to TED Talks and you search, I think it's called Interview Power Pose or Power Pose, there's a great TED Talk about doing a Superman, Superwoman pose where you have your hands up and your legs apart and you do a couple deep breathing that you go in with more confidence, which I think is just interesting how our mind and body relate to one another. So do think about some deep breathing, get to the restroom right before you go in, check yourself one more time that everything's put together and ready to go. During the interview, you will do all of these things. It just will come, most of this will come naturally to you. All the basics, being polite to everybody you meet, showing your enthusiasm, thanking them for the opportunity to interview. Some of you may have had this experience or you use this. It's not uncommon, so maybe you check in with a front desk, receptionist, office manager, and then you go back for an interview. It's not uncommon for the folks doing the interview afterwards to go back and check with the person at the front desk. What did you think? The goal is, are you consistently friendly, polite to everyone you meet? I don't know if any of you have done that or that's been part of an interview process, but many people I talk to say, yeah, don't just turn it on for the person who's going to be interviewing you. I want to know that's the kind of person you are all the time. Okay, wrapping it up, again, at the end, be prepared for that. Restate once again why we should hire you, or anything that you want to share that we haven't talked about yet. If you get that question, even if you have shared it all, I would still have a summary and say, boy, I think we covered almost everything. I just want to restate, blah, blah, blah. It's just a really nice closing. You might want to walk away and write some notes to yourself. What were your impressions? What are the pros? What are the cons? What's your gut reaction? What does your head say? What does your heart say? Right away, and then do that again in another 24 hours and see where you're at. Because sometimes you're offered positions you don't want to take for a variety of reasons, so be thinking about that. I would encourage you to write a thank you email or letter or note. They seem to all be acceptable. The key is that a lot of people don't do it, so it's a really nice follow-up. It may get you the job. It definitely leaves a positive impression one way or the other. If you know the time frame is really tight, then I would do an email because it gets there quicker. If you're applying at a place that talks about being paperless, I would do an email because that's their environment. But a handwritten note, a typed thank you, any of those would be great. Within 24 to 48 hours after the interview, I'd encourage you to get that in. Okay, so there's lots of types of phone interviews. So phone would be one, committee, back-to-back, traditional group interviews. I want to talk a little, if you end up with a phone interview or an online interview of some type, all these rules apply no matter what. But you have to watch for technology and watch for distraction behind you. So I wouldn't want to have, I don't know, some big political poster behind me if I was interviewing for a job. It might be distracting, right? Let's say I was in my house, I'd want to make sure my family didn't interrupt me, there's no dog barking, etc. So trying to take away those distractions. The other thing with any technology interview, phone, computer, is there tends to be more pauses. Sometimes it takes a while to hear and then respond. So you just have to be patient with that. Committee interviews would be you with 3 or 4 people. And the key there, again, all the same rules apply. But if you had, 3 to 4 people, I would want to start my response with Leah, and then I'd look at Emily, and then I'd go to Katie, and then I'm almost done, I'd go back to Leah because she was the person who asked me the question. Again, you do this in conversation all the time. It's just when 3 people are staring at you, you're like, wait, who do I look at? What should I do here? So trying to include everybody in the conversation. Back-to-back interviews might be where you have an interview with an HR and then a supervisor, and then you meet with two people who would be your potential colleagues. The tip there is that the third person in that row hasn't heard you yet. So even though you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm saying the exact same thing for the third time, that's true, but they're not hearing you for the third time. So trying to keep up the energy and the detail and the stories each time. Group interviews, the only time I've heard this recently is for county positions. So if you end up applying for a county position, and it might be used other places, but that's where I've heard it, this would be all four of you are applying for the same position and you're in the room together with the competing candidates. I don't hear it very often. If you end up having one of those, we can talk more. I don't want you to worry about something you might not get in the future. But it's not worrying too much about what other people are saying, not dominating, not being too passive, that you're part of the conversation. Okay, I'm going to pause there before we talk about social media and Handshake. Other questions you have about interviewing, tips from your own experiences in the past, anything else you want to share with the group? We're doing well on time. The bulk of the presentation is this. Again, maybe 15, 20 more minutes on the next topic, just so I give you a heads up of where we're at. Looks like we're doing okay. All right. So oh wait, I had someone show up at an interview with her daughter with her once. Yeah, that's challenging, right? I know daycare is very challenging and oftentimes hard to arrange, but a problem for the interview. Yeah, probably be better to call and reschedule and say you had a family emergency than bring a child. Interesting, at some of the job fairs we've had students where a parent has showed up with them. Also a red flag. So don't want to bring your kids or your parents to an interview. So again, seems obvious, but yeah. I'm trying to think of any other recent stories I had. I did have, this is interesting, I talked with a superintendent recently who was from a smaller town in Minnesota where it's quite difficult to find teachers right now. And he said he had someone come into the interview and said, I'm going to have to leave my phone on because I just had an interview with another district and they might be calling me to offer a job. He's like, oh great, that is also a red flag. On the other hand, he said, I went through with it because we were so desperate. I think it was maybe a math teacher. He said, normally would I say to do that? Absolutely not. But I would hire this person still because I was that desperate for a math teacher if he was qualified, you know. But yeah, fun to hear those stories. Okay, so social media. In the past, you know, when I started in this field 15 years ago in career services, we didn't talk about social media as part of an interview presentation or a job search presentation. What we find now is many employers do say they Google their candidates. Some of them admit it, some of them don't, but I would say between 75 to 90% of folks say they might Google a candidate as part of the process. The point of Googling is to see consistency about who you say you are and that you are that way in all settings, including on social media. So I would Google yourself. I think we might have talked about this at another time. So I would Google yourself, make sure that everything that comes up is accurate, that you're comfortable with it, and then think about ways that you can have that positive image. So I use this to talk about, you know, consistency of branding. People don't always like the word branding for people, but the same idea. What is your, who are you? Is that consistent? So if you thought, let's use number one, so Apple. If you had to give me your impression of Apple, what they're known for, and maybe you can just chat it in, what do you think Apple is known for? Who are they? What is their brand? Yeah. iPhones, keeping us connected, phones, technology. They started in education. They tend to have more creative software, constantly improving, trying to be customer friendly. They're also more expensive. Often people say there's a cost, and they keep changing and forcing us to keep buying new things. Could be part of your impression. But they've definitely found a niche and have identified who they are and who they aren't and focused on that. And I would say the same thing is true of Starbucks. They were sort of the first corner store coffee, maybe overpriced by some people's expectation, but they've been pretty consistent in what they deliver. They've worked hard to treat their employees well. They've had training, whatever, lots of things you could say about them. So I know it's different to have a company and a person, but I think the same idea applies, that you just want to be consistent with who you are. So if I look at your application, I bring you in for an interview, I call your references, and then I Google you, I'm basically getting the same message about you over and over again. So just know that you are being Googled, and that's not just on your social media, but thinking about your email address, what you're affiliated with, and how that might impact your job search, who and what you're following. So it's great to be active, but just be thoughtful about what that looks like. And you do have control. I really do think if we know it's happening, we can take control of that process. If I think about some of the main social media networks, LinkedIn is really sort of your office. Twitter is what you do at the coffee pot or at the water fountain. Facebook tends to be more social time, what happens after hours. So if you had to choose one to focus on for a job search, it would be LinkedIn. And some of you probably already have a LinkedIn account, and if you don't, I think it would be great for you to create one. LinkedIn is nice because it's really taking information that you would have in a resume and a cover letter. You dump it into your profile. You follow organizations. You connect with people that might be helpful for you in a job search or even just in networking. It allows you to see the trends of organizations, and is another great way to research an organization. So LinkedIn would be great. Just like resumes, if you create a profile and you're like, am I doing this right? You can send it to us and we would do a critique and say, oh, I would add more here or maybe take this out. So we would help you with the process of developing a LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, a daughter, but yeah.
Okay. Now, I want to talk about another technology called Handshake. Some of you, if you post positions, you might have used Handshake in the past. Handshake is the technology. Anytime an employer contacts us and says, I have a job or internship to post, this is where we would direct them. You all can access it at css.joinhandshake.com. When you go in, some of your information's already been uploaded, but it will look like this. You'll click it's single sign-on. You'll use your same credentials that you use to sign on to the email system. Once you're in, and I borrowed my coworker Andrea, her profile, because she's created a student profile. If you have your resume, it's a lot like LinkedIn. You're updating your profile. You're including some information. Oh, on here, some of this is private. Like the employer won't know your gender or your ethnicity. It's just an internal thing. The employer would see something that looks more like this. Who are you? Your education, work experience. You write a short bio about yourself. And then you choose to make it active, or you don't have to. But if you're actively looking for a job, you would make it visible to employers. And then once you're in, you can start using it to look for jobs. So you have your profile, and then there's a job function. And the beauty of this site, one of the things we like is that employers get to post a position once and select all the colleges they want the jobs to be fed to. So rather than having to go to every single college site and develop a profile, the employer does it once, they write the job, and then they select which colleges they want their jobs to be posted at, which means we're getting a much broader range of jobs, more cities, more states. It also allows you, if you start going in and favoriting, the system starts to identify those and starts feeding you jobs it thinks you might be interested in. So you all probably know how to define that better. I always think it's a Netflix-like feature. So if you watch this movie, here's 7 other movies you'd like. This would be, you like this job, here's 7 other jobs that seem like might be related and you might be interested in it. They're similar. Sometimes people are like, well, should I do LinkedIn or should I do Handshake? I would actually do both for two different reasons. LinkedIn tends to be more about the networking, the professional organization, real social friendly. Handshake is much more focused on the job and internship search, and it's a little bit easier to navigate. But both of them are great, but for different purposes. For Handshake, if you decide you want to go out there, I would upload a picture, work on that profile, add in your experiences. You could cut and paste that from your resume, add some skills, and then choose to make it active or not active. Okay, our website, again, css.edu/career. I think you probably have my contact information from before, but Katie can always connect you to me or someone in the office. I want to pause again. So questions on the social media or on Handshake? Any other or tips to share?
Mary, this is
Yeah.
Katie. I just
Hi.
wanted to ask a question because I've never heard of Handshake before.
Yeah.
So is that something that is like a nationwide thing, or do employers specifically contact St. Scholastica and say, I have a job posting, or?
It's both,
Okay.
and haven't heard of it because we just switched to
Okay.
this summer, so it's not like you've been missing
Okay.
out. Yeah, so we just switched. So if an employer contacted us and said, I'd like to post a job for your students, we direct them to Handshake and say, set up a profile, select Scholastica, post it. So we're
Got
getting
it.
them that way. But let's say Fairview in the Twin Cities already has a profile and they now have a position. They would post the position, then they look through every college that's part of Handshake and just click, 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 and then it goes out to all of us. So it's both ways. Yep.
Okay. All right.
It was developed by some IT students at Michigan Tech. That I think that's the right one. A smaller school that they knew they weren't getting the employers to post jobs because it was a small college, much like us, and they wanted to equal the playing ground. So make it easier for employers. So maybe they don't know us, maybe they do, but why not send us their job description?
Right.
For regional students, UMD, University of Minnesota Duluth, actually the whole University of Minnesota system, and UWS, University of Wisconsin Superior, they're changing in the spring. So regionally it's going to be great because we can advertise together and say post once and all the regional schools will get the posting.
Nice. I love it.
It's great. Yep. So I didn't look at how many folks are on right now, maybe 10 or 12. So I'm going to give you a challenge with a reward at the end because we're trying to get people onto the site, to the Handshake site. So a week from today, first I'm going to get the class list from Katie. And a week from today, I'm going to go out, and if any of you have started to develop your profile, and I'll be able to tell if you've added anything in. Anybody who's started working on their profile, I'll put you into a hat. I'm going to draw and send you a CSS gift. So if you're someone who's motivated by external things like I am, I'll give you a week to get in there. You don't have to have it completed. I just want to see that you've uploaded a picture, you've started to put your education or your experiences in. So about a week from today, I'll check and see from all of you that are participating today if you've done that, and reward someone for getting in there and doing it.
Mary, I have one more question.
Yep.
Is this only for current students, or as these students graduate, can they continue to use Handshake?
Yeah, good question. It's one, if you're currently a student, you're going to have it forever. Now that you're in the system, so anybody who's a current student. Alums that are, already graduated, so if you're working with someone who's a year or two out, I would have to add them into the system. But we can do that. But going forward, it will be all current students, and then as they change to alum status, they'll still have access to it.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yep, so if you ever have an alum who wants to be added, contact Andrea or me or Diane at the front desk. We can all add those students in. It's very easy. Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I think there were a couple questions there. So.
Okay. So let's go back here. There. CSSjoinhandshake.com. Yours should come up and it should look just like this, except it's not going to say Mary on there. This came up because I had already been logged into the system, but it should be branded CSS, and then you select login or something, and you'll put your CSS email, and your username. Yes, Interview Stream is also available now and as an alum. That's a great question. And in fact, I should mention that currently our services are unlimited for alums. We may change that a bit in the future where we say 3 years out unlimited, and beyond that once or twice for consulting, and then we'd refer you to another service, a community service. And that's what most people do anyways. The highest need tends to be right after you graduate, but sometimes 2 years from now, a promotion comes up and you need a reminder about something on your resume. So we'd still connect with you. We're just going to limit how many times we do that for alums that are further out. So we're working on that policy right now, but no, you can always reach out to us for resources. The only thing that you don't qualify for when you graduate, there's one job fair we have that you have to be a current student. And that's the Minnesota Private Colleges Job and Internship Fair. So that's one thing that you're limited by once you graduate and are an alum. I should mention on our website, so css.edu, css.edu/career, we have a list of events, and there are a couple job fairs coming up. The first one is in the Twin Cities at the Convention Center. There'll be about 250 employers there from a wide range of industries. You have to be a current undergraduate student from one of the private colleges to attend that. You can look on our website, get a sense of who's going to be there and if it's worth your time. If you're interested, contact me. I'll help you get registered. Another fair that's local over at University of Wisconsin-Superior, so if you're someone regionally, that might be a fair. We also get quite a few virtual fairs that we advertise, so definitely keep that in mind as an option if you want to go to a job fair. We also use LinkedIn quite a bit to help students connect with other students or other alums. So I was just working with someone who's going to be moving to San Antonio, Texas. So we're currently looking for alums that she can be in contact with. And in her case, we're looking for people in her field, but we're actually just looking for people that might give her insights on biggest industries, places to live, cost of living. So we've used LinkedIn a lot for those kind of questions. And you can do that on your own, certainly, but we can help make those connections for you. Interesting about this, I missed the question up above here about the Facebook friend requests. Our social work department, when they do questions, mock interviews with their students, one of the questions they ask is a little different than yours, but what if one of your clients wants to be friends with you on Facebook and talking about boundaries? I agree. I think you can come up with the parameters that make sense. So for me, as an example, with students, I won't friend students on Facebook, but I'll connect with you on LinkedIn because it's such a professional setting. I'm not worried about crossing too much in terms of our personal lives. So if someone really wanted to connect, like a student, I would say connect with me on LinkedIn. I only use Facebook for friends and family, something like that. I see there's one other I missed up above. Oh, so what if there's a couple different things on here that are interesting. The question about what if someone's tagged you in something? So often you can get rid of those. Oh, okay, two different questions. If there's pictures out there, usually you can. I mean, it's sort of out there forever, but you can untag yourself and take some of that down. So if that came up, I know I worked with someone who said, and it wasn't even a huge deal, but she was uncomfortable. She had been at a race with her sister and a couple other friends, really hot. So they were all running just in their athletic bra, which, it was a hot day. It was not uncommon. But then a picture was taken and put on Facebook. She's like, it just felt weird all of a sudden to have it on there. So she went off and took those things down. So sometimes it's not like blatantly bad. It's just like, boy, that's not the image I want out there. Okay, the other question is, and I've had students do this. I just had a student who Googled himself, had actually sort of an unusual name, someone with the exact same name, had quite the criminal history, which is the first thing that came up. So we did a couple different things. He started using his middle initial along with his name to help direct people to the right spot. He started putting his LinkedIn URL on his resume. Again, it helps direct people to the right spot. And then we practiced, although he never needed it, but we practiced how he would answer the question if someone said, boy, I looked you up, it looks like you might have some criminal record, and how to answer that without getting sort of rattled by the question. So in general, I'd say use a middle initial or your middle name, and then help direct the employer to the right spot, the right you, if that makes sense. Yeah. So my name, Mary Anderson. Surprising, there's some other people with my same name. So like on LinkedIn, I'm Mary Anderson Duluth. And frankly, it's because I couldn't even find Mary Anderson. On my resume, I use my middle initial along with it. So yeah, sometimes you have to clarify and get people to the right person. All right. Let's see what else, if I've gotten all this. Great. Anything else? From any of you, Katie, anything else that you're thinking of that we missed today?
No, I can't think of anything. I thought it was really great. I'm excited about Handshake.
Good. And if you want, sometime we could come over to your department, side note, to maybe share it with everybody. That'd probably be helpful.
I think that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay.
We just get so many questions about job openings and things, and I just love that we now have another resource for our students. So.
Yeah. And I think it'll be great. Both you can be guiding students, but I think what happens on our campus is that sometimes employers are contacting not just career services, but faculty, so we all can be directing people,
Right.
And then students have equal access. So it's going to be wonderful. Yeah.
Great.
Good. Well, I think we did pretty well with time. Yes. Okay. I didn't take your whole evening. You can still have dinner. Yes, it's great. Good. Well, again, I'm happy at any time you think of additional questions. You get home tomorrow, it's a month from now. Wait, how do I handle this? What about this situation? And some of them are private questions anyway, some special circumstance in your life. So for any of you, don't hesitate to reach out again in the future for more direction or guidance. All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mary.
Thanks, Katie, for the invite. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Okay. Yep.
Bye.
Bye.